How many shares of stock would you buy to speak at the shareholder meeting of Pizza Ranch?
Bog Panda.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bog Panda. I am Kelly at Kelly, just Kelly, nothing else, no fake thing in front of it. Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram.
I am Dr. Mike, medically certified professional at Official Pagan on everything. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, turn on notifications, check out our merch store, and play that game where Kelly will punch you in the face like Chuck Eric.
Yep. So on both of those notes, on this whole doctor thing and the whole Chuck Eric thing, the way things work out and the way we record, I'm pleased to announce that you are now seeing a card shown at the top of this video where you can click through to another video that will resolve all those issues for you. And someone hopefully will be better. So, but for this, so we're not going to get a better mic this show. I don't think. Doesn't sound like it. But we'll just want to take a couple minutes to chat about stories a little older, but super interesting. A gentleman who wished to remain anonymous bought enough shares of Nintendo stock to be able to attend their annual meeting, their shareholder meeting, and was told, hey, you had to buy, it was $40,000 worth of stock. I think it was 100 shares was roughly about what it had to be to get him one full voting share kind of deal. Came to the tune of $40,000 at that time. He got there and they said, okay, you can attend the meeting and you can ask a question. No guarantees it's going to get heard, but you can ask it. But he did it. He got to the meeting. He got to ask his question. He was saying, hey, why don't you recreate some of your old games like F-Zero? It was the one he brought up, but he's a particularly large fan of. Basically got it costs a lot from the chairman. And then somebody else said, oh, we're always looking. But so there wasn't a, yes, we hear what you're saying, but he at least got his voice heard. Well, it was listened to, but it was heard. So what'd you think of this, Mike?
I thought it was interesting. It reminds me of a recent stock thing that was in the news where this famous rich guy said he was going to buy a social media platform, which he tried backing out of purchasing. And it does make me think that maybe, just maybe, he was trying to buy this social media platform to stop his ex from constantly posting negative things about him. It seems like a really, really expensive way to kick your ex off the social media platform. And that's kind of what this feels like. This is a really, really expensive way for a guy to solidify himself as the biggest F-Zero fan ever. Are you an F-Zero guy at all, Kelly?
Much like Zero Tolerance, I have avoided every game with zero in it so far. It's just been kind of a position I've had. I said, zero's not for me. 007 GoldenEye, never played it. Too many zeros. Zero, so it's kind of been a thing. I need to get over it. I have gotten over it because Zero Tolerance, I have played on my Legends Ultimate now since you informed me I had it on there. And it's
nice.
awesome.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, super fun. So, and it's in the original 350 on the Legends. I don't even have to jump over to the coin op stuff. So it was just great. And it's fun to play that on with the, the arcade settings on there on the Legends. So yeah, love that game. So I'm going to need to overcome I don't do
zero phobia,
zero games. I haven't done, but have you unburdened by the zero issues that I have? Have you tried F-Zero?
So I have. So I was never, particularly in the early days, I wasn't a huge Super Nintendo fan. So I was a Sega guy. And if you ask anybody, the console war, the biggest one that we've lived through and survived to tell the tales, was definitely Sega Genesis versus Super Nintendo. There are documentaries about this. There's a excellent book called Console Wars that was written by the then head of Sega America, who basically makes it sound like Die Hard. When you read his book, the things that they were doing to each other and the espionage aspects of it, the way they were trying to topple the other one's empire. But the reality of it is that Sega Genesis was competing with the original Nintendo, not the Super Nintendo. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Sega systems, before they ran themselves into the ground with the 32X and Saturn debacles, Sega systems had insane long lifespans. So they had an 8-bit system out before the NES called the Master System. The Master System went on from the early 80s to well into the 90s in parts of Europe and South America, particularly in Brazil. They were still making officially licensed games for the Master System until like the late 90s. Sega Genesis actually came out to compete with the original Nintendo, which came out after the Master System. But it was such a huge system that it was still hadn't even quite reached its peak yet when the Super Nintendo came out. So it ended up battling with Super Nintendo for the entire lifespan of the Super Nintendo as a system, despite the fact that it was already a few years old at that point. And that's one of the reasons that there are different specs on the systems. So a lot of people would argue that Super Nintendo had better sound and more colors, which it absolutely does. But part of that was because it came out later. So they were able to see what had already been done and kind of improve on that. And it worked to a large degree. The Super Nintendo games do sound better, and some of them look a lot better because of the extra colors. Not all of them, because Super Nintendo does have a weird aspect ratio. That's for a different show and for people smarter than me who understand the mechanics of that. But Super Nintendo's internal aspect ratio for the games when they're developed is weird. It's not like the regular aspect ratio of what TVs were at that time, the 4:3. So when you play the game, it actually stretches it out to a 4:3. And in certain games, that is very apparent, particularly when you're putting them side by side with the Genesis versions, which are in the correct aspect ratio. So if you play Mortal Kombat, Genesis, and Super Nintendo side by side, sure, the Genesis one is missing sound effects and isn't as colorful, but it's really apparent that the characters are stretched out on the Super Nintendo one. They look wider and flatter. F-Zero was a game that was meant to show off the Super FX chip that Super Nintendo games had. Super Nintendo was really big on add-on chipsets in their cartridges so that they could do things that the system couldn't actually natively do on its own. Sega is just not a fan of that. They very rarely did it. I think there's only one actual Sega game that even did it. It was in the very end of the system's lifespan. They did a port of Virtua Racer, which looks way better on every other system because it was, generations after the Genesis at this point. But Genesis got an official port of it that did use a custom chipset, though, just to make it run as anything that looked like Virtua Racer on the system. So it was rare that it happened on Genesis. It did happen with some third-party games, though. But Super Nintendo was all about these custom chipsets, and their big one was the Super FX chip, which allowed games to have scaling and rotation that wasn't actually native to the system itself. F-Zero is one of the early games that really, really took advantage of that. So it gave you a racing game with a way more elaborate track than a 2D game like that would typically have. Tracks that really were more in line with the 3D arcade racing games of the time. So at the time, F-Zero looked amazing. It looked like it was blazingly fast. And because of the scaling and rotation of the Super FX chip, it felt like it was a 3D track and it was great. Playing it now, not so much. Coincidentally, before you had sent me this, I actually played F-Zero recently. And I was like, this looks flat and weird when you play it now. I understand though, I remember the hype around this game, and I'm not a racing game guy, as we've said, but I remember the game being very impressive looking and blazingly fast. And now it actually feels a little slow and it looks flat and weird. And that's, not because the game was poorly made. It was just because that's what it was at the time. So it looks like something trying to look 3D and not quite accomplishing that, and maybe it's because I understand what the Super FX chip is doing, that instead what it's really doing, you're not moving in a 3D environment. It's taking the flat plane that's underneath the picture of the back of the vehicle and it's stretching it and turning it to make it look like you're moving around in this 3D environment, when really it's the flat plane that's just being moved around in front of you. So maybe it's because I understand that and that's what I see now. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, well, and so on a previous show, I got a growing to-do list because I'm assuming F-Zero's on Super Console X as well.
Yeah.
As is nearly everything. So I got some micro mages to do, and I think I need to try this out too and take a look at it. And I'll have time to do that because I won't watch a movie with Zero Mostel in it. I will not eat a Zero bar, and I won't watch Less Than Zero either. So I have time.
One of my favorite movies.
Because I have time now because of my position to try these games out.
Excellent. And again, F-Zero is a super fun game. It's just a game that didn't age well for me. And I think it's just because I understand how it works now. Whereas at the time, it was like, this is amazing on a 16-bit console. And now it's like, they're stretching this 2D picture underneath this other picture to make it look like it's moving. So
cool. All right. Well, Zero My Hero is my least favorite Schoolhouse Rock song. And thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.